You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Pastor James Cleland.
Sitting in for Sarah today. Thank you so much, Pastor Cleland, for being here today.
My pleasure.
And we have a great update from our friends at Lutheran Heritage Foundation to share with you in just a moment. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise. He is Executive Director of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Dr. Heise, thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Andy and Pastor Cleland.
We always enjoy sharing the stories of Lutheran Heritage Foundation and the many partners you work with around the globe to bring God's Word and great resources into the hands and really to the hearts of so many people as well. For our listeners maybe not familiar with LHF, share with us just a little bit about what is the work of LHF today.
Well, actually, it's quite appropriate to speak about this because Friday at Concordia Seminary's commencement ceremonies, our founder, the Reverend Dr. Robert Rahn, received the Distinguished Alumnus Award, and he is celebrating his 50th anniversary of his ordination back in 1961. Wow. So if my math is right, I think that's working out. No, actually, let's see, 61, 50, right, 50 years, good, my math isn't bad. And he founded LHF back in 1992, basically with the idea of restoring a Lutheran witness to the country of Russia, which had, of course, gone through 70 plus years of atheism and had just recently, lifted that cloud of atheism over that country. And in 1992, the opportunities were great for being involved in missions and starting back to restore a witness of a Lutheran church that had been the second largest in all of Russia.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So it sounds like your organization's kind of on the front lines of some of the persecution that might be going on right now. I'm kind of in a Lutheran bubble because I'm at the seminary, and I rarely feel persecution for being a Christian. But there's some stuff going on right now that LHF is currently kind of involved in. Is that right? In like Finland and some other places?
That's right, Pastor Cleland. Actually, we work very closely with Bishop-elect Juhana Pohjola, and the Reverend Dr. Juhana Pohjola has recently just been charged with incitement in April of this year. In fact, maybe I can kind of set the timeline for you how this all worked. Back in 2004, we worked with the Finnish Mission Diocese, which had broken away from the State Church of Finland because of liberal theological issues. And Pastor Pohjola at that time had edited a booklet that was written by Dr. Päivi Räsänen, who is a medical doctor and also a member of Parliament. Finnish Parliament. And basically the title was Male and Female, He Created Them. And it was a biblical response to the issue of homosexual marriage. Back in 2004, we can all remember that you hadn't had Supreme Court cases. You hadn't that this hadn't really gone through so quickly as it did in 2008 to 2013, when all of a sudden became law of the land in the United States. Well, this was back then. And in 2017, the government of Finland passed a same-sex marriage act, which allowed homosexual couples to marry. This booklet all of a sudden was on their radar screen, something that had been written 13 years prior to that. And so in November of 2019, Dr. Räsänen was actually called in for interrogations by Helsinki police, along with Dr. Pohjola. And that case had gone through now until April of this year, 2021, and now charges have been lodged of incitement. Basically, they said they have attacked the prosecutor general of Finland said they have attacked the equality and dignity of homosexuals in Finland just by quoting from the Bible. And so now they are literally going to have to get legal counsel. And if convicted, could serve up to 2 years in prison.
Wow.
This is reality.
Based on a document that was written 13 years, you said,
Right.
prior to
Back to
the law
2004. So
taking.
now even 17 years ago, and we'd helped fund
Wow.
that document. But of course, Dr. Rasanen, they are charging her because of this booklet, because of social media posts she's made, and words spoken on radio talk shows. Mind you, she is a very gentle, early 60s. She's in her early 60s, very gentle, dignified person who in no way questions the equality and dignity of any person. And basically, what she and Bishop Pohjola have said, we just simply support what the scriptures say about homosexual marriage. We love all people, but we have to speak the truth, and we speak the truth in love.
Right.
That's no longer acceptable to many in that country. And so we publicized this actually on our own website a few weeks ago. And immediately, Dr. Gregory Seltz of Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty, my old classmate from Guardian Lutheran in Dearborn, Michigan, he said he would be going to the Finnish consulate and registering their support. I also heard from Joe Devarian, who is an LCMS member and is with the Alliance Defending Freedom. And I talked to him on the phone. He says, we already supply international lawyers for cases like these. We've supported Dr. Rasanen, and they would be happy to do the same for Bishop-elect Pohjola. Although talking to his cousin just a few days ago, I understand he has two of his sisters are prominent lawyers, and his father is a retired judge. So I think his legal assistance is pretty strong right now.
Good.
Wow. That's just overwhelming just to think about. And this is just one example of persecution of the church. You have written about this, about persecution of the church as well, in another part of the world. Would you like to share with us about that?
Well, yeah, here comes shameless plug time. I have been blessed to actually have my dissertation at Concordia Seminary accepted as a book to be published by Lexham Press out in Washington. The editor, Todd Haynes, is actually a member of the LCMS, and it's an evangelical publishing company. So I'm grateful that Todd has been able to help. And of course, my mentor, Dr. Robert Kolb, of course, steered me towards Lexham there. But basically, I've written about the persecution and martyrdom of Lutherans in Stalin's Soviet Union in the 1920s and 1930s. And something that Dr. Rasanen said, actually, in one of the articles I read, she said, "I do not consider myself guilty." And I kept thinking to myself, where have I heard that phrase before? And I thought, oh, yes, I wrote about that. And I literally Googled the words on my text, and I came back to a case in 1929, 1930, and a Sunday school teacher by the name of Benita Cassetti, who had been arrested in Leningrad because she was teaching children Sunday school. And those were her words as they arrested her. I was able to see the NKVD file, that's the precursor of the KGB. And she literally said, "I do not consider myself guilty because I'm just teaching the Bible to kids. And that has its place. There is that kind of freedom in the Soviet Union." Well, of course, that was soon to change, and change quickly. And she was arrested along with her sister and many others at that time because of a new law that Joseph Stalin had passed in 1929, where he said it was no longer acceptable to teach children Sunday school. And so a couple of pastors in Leningrad made sure that they found their teachers, like the Cassetti sisters and others, and spread them out through apartments in Leningrad. But right before Christmas in 1929, 30 or so were arrested and ultimately sent to heavy labor in the White Sea Canal, which Anne Applebaum writes in her book Gulag about the terrors of working there. So people paid a price. And what's really intriguing, as I go through that, I read how several pastors were very aware of the signs of the time. They knew the zeitgeist in the Soviet Union in the late 1920s, and they said, things are changing here. You are not going to be living in a free country in the future, and you better know your Bibles because they're going to take them away from you and they're going to close your churches. and you're going to need to keep that church alive in an underground fashion. And both these pastors who had led that Sunday school project in Leningrad were both executed, actually, arrested and executed too by the Soviet authorities. So, they see these things. I'm not saying something like this is on the horizon here, but, as I read this and as I look at real history of Finland right now, I begin to worry and say, hey, we better also prepare a younger generation for eventuality of things that can happen, because we can read that in history.
Mm-hmm. I'm just glad you've written a book about the Russian Lutherans. This is not something that was on my radar, which I guess would be a result of the persecution that they experienced, that it was kind of erased from Russian history in a way.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued to learn more about this. I just didn't know. I always think of German Lutherans,
sure,
and, Swedish Lutherans, but I just never really thought of Russian Lutherans. That's really cool.
And Pastor Cleland, the really interesting thing is a lot of these folks were ethnic German or Estonian or ethnic Finns. They had that kind of background, and that was how they were allowed into this to actually have a Lutheran church in Russia centuries back, literally dating back to the middle of the 16th century. And then up to that current time. But then, of course, with the changes in the laws in 1905 in Russia under Tsar Nicholas II, actually Russian citizens were allowed to go to Lutheran churches, and there were many who were intrigued by Lutheran theology. So there were actually ethnic Russians in the Lutheran church, including a guy by the name of Yevgeny Haneke, who happened to be the right-hand man for Ivan Pavlov, and we all know him for the Pavlov's dog experiment. So a lot of interesting folks there. And but what the story really, I think, just indicates, people who are seeing the trends of the time and what is happening. And so it's really troubling to see what's happening in Finland. I think I can actually add a little positive note, because we have been working with the Reverend Tuomo Simioki. He's been helping us with mission work in Africa, and he is the head of the mission board for the Finnish Mission Diocese, which is literally the newest church partner for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod as of this year. And Bishop-elect Pohjola is his cousin. So I talked to him a few days ago via Zoom, and he told me, he said, there's a little bit of a backlash. Even atheists in Finland are beginning to question what's going on here, that perhaps they are going too far, and that this bishop has the right to speak his own mind. Mind you, this is also the state Lutheran Church allows homosexual marriage. So they're kind of quiet, although some of the bishops now are beginning to speak up and say, this is going too far. So hopefully some people are at least beginning to rethink and saying, do we really want to do this? Do we want to persecute people for just expressing what's in the scriptures?
We have more to learn from Dr. Heise and Lutheran Heritage Foundation, more updates from him as well. We'll do that in just a moment. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Pastor James Cleland.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Pastor James Cleland.
Today we're talking with the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise. He's Executive Director of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, giving us an update today. And in the first half, really heard a lot about what's going on around the world, particularly in a number of places, what persecution has looked like. But we also have some, I think, some more encouraging things to share as well. Pastor Heise, share with us some of the work, some of the projects that have been happening with Lutheran Heritage Foundation and the progress that's being made with those.
Well, I guess I could probably maybe start that by mentioning I was really grateful to zoom into the multi-ethnic symposium put on by Concordia Seminary, and I've really
Wasn't that great?
I've found I have about 5 or 6 of Philip Jenkins' books, and so I've actually had the chance to sit down and talk to him briefly about some of what he's written, and his theme, of course, is that this new face of Christianity is moving to the southern hemisphere, to Africa and Asia in particular, and actually that's what I see in the work of Lutheran Heritage Foundation. I mentioned that we had begun our work in Russia, and by God's grace, we're now working in 92 countries and 128 languages around the world, and most of those are in Africa and Asia. Just a recent example is the Zhao language. I had never heard of Zhao, and it is a language of kind of Tibetan Burmese background. So if you want to find the Manipur Evangelical Lutheran Church, which was established in 1954, you have to go way to the east of India and look at a map, and you will see it is lodged between Bangladesh and Burma, or as they call it in modern terms, Myanmar, and to the north is Bhutan and Tibet. So this church is in a very remote area. As I spoke to our LHF India coordinator, Cherub Sundaram, he told me that actually over 100 years ago, there were cannibals living in that region up just slightly north of Manipur. And missionaries from Scottish and Welsh background, Presbyterian, Baptist background came and shared the word of God to people in the 1890s, early 1900s. Lutheranism came there. And now the bishop of this church is actually a graduate of Concordia Seminary, Fort Wayne. And as we began to work with him, he said, we don't have anything really in the language of our people. And of course, they learn Hindi. Hindi is the dominant language of India, but so is Zhao. Zhao is taught in the schools, and it is the language a lot of people speak in their homes. So he wanted to do Luther's small catechism in the language of Zhao. And so we started looking, okay, what on earth? Where is this? And working with them, I'm happy to report that a couple of weeks ago, now we have printed the Zhao Catechism, and it will be used to teach people in the church there, many who don't know as much about Christianity. And so to give them kind of those Lutheran particulars that you get through the small catechism is really a blessing. And along with that, we also, about a month ago, have published the first Punjabi Luther Small Catechism as well, put out by us. So using several different languages, with India, I think we're close to 10 languages, which means we only have maybe several thousand more to go. Before the Lord returns. So we're just dipping our toes into the ocean, or the Indian Ocean, you might say. And but it's really a joy to always see this come to countries or regions of the world that have never had God's word in their own language or Lutheran teachings, and to see the excitement registered with those who are doing this work and leading the church.
I love that. I think that's amazing, translating the small catechism. I mean, it really fits with what it was originally used for. I think that's great. And now it sounds like you typically do the small catechism first, or maybe some children's material?
That's actually a good question. There's 2 books that we work with primarily. Of course, the small catechism, we try to do the Enchiridion, the basic 6 chief parts, and sometimes we'll do that in booklet form, because sometimes you're working in countries where Christianity is illegal, and a little small booklet form is something a person can stick into his or her pocket fairly quickly and hide it. But we do the catechism with questions as well. And along with that, usually some type of children's Bible story book. A Child's Garden of Bible Stories that was published by CPH back in 1948 is something that we work on. And now we have actually created our own teen Bible study. It's called God's Word for You. It uses manga style characteristics for the illustrations. And so this is something we're really excited. We use 2 former CPH authors to write the text. And so now we're finishing up the illustrations, and that will be published very quickly within the next few weeks, hopefully in English, with the idea that we're going to translate this into many Asian languages.
I think that's going to be a big hit with youth here. Coming from a former high school English teacher,
Yeah.
manga, that sounds great to me. That's
Yeah.
going to be really
and believe me, it was kind of interesting. Our coordinator for Asia, Southeast Asia, Reverend Dr. Ted Nothalong, he had to work with illustrators because at first Jesus was akin to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so we had to tell the illustrator to tone down his muscles just a little bit, and the wolves looked like docile little shepherd dogs, and I said, okay, get some sharper teeth there, and so he's really worked closely to make sure that we get those images just right.
That's great.
I see you're already wanting a copy.
Oh, I want a copy.
Yes.
This is exciting.
Yeah, we'd be happy to get you one.
Awesome.
Pastor Heise, where else do we see the work of Lutheran Heritage Foundation happening today?
Well, because of the pandemic, places, sometimes publishing houses are open then close, and right now Cambodia has been locked down a bit, but now it looks like it's opening up, and we hope this week to actually begin to print the Khmer Book of Concord. Khmer is the language of Cambodia, and through our director there, Sopa Korn, who grew up in a Buddhist family, this is really exciting work. He's actually working on a master's degree through Grand Canyon University, which is actually run by the president is Brian Mueller, is an LCMS member, and my former prof Paul Robbie is also teaching there from Concordia Seminary. So Sopa is upgrading his credentials there and learning more as he does that. But he has been working assiduously with a good team to finally put together this Book of Concord in Khmer. And in Cambodia, we just see great things happening. Our own OIM missionary J.P. Sima is doing fantastic work and working together with the church there, a small but growing church in Cambodia, throughout Cambodia. And once again, the excitement of so many of the people there to see these Lutheran documents come into a language that they can read and be able to explain and teach their people and help grow their church leaders. I just think of the killing fields not terribly long ago, and actually Sopa's father's cousin was the head of one of these camps. He was actually a very famous individual. A few months ago, you would have noted he was in the New York Times obituary because he was in prison for life and actually converted to Christianity. And it seems to have been a genuine conversion from what Sopa told me. So, a lot has changed in that country. And the opportunities now are great to just continue to grow a church because there's more freedom maybe sometimes there than there are in Western lands, as we started off talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks be to God for all the work that's happening around the world for people to have these great works in their own languages, to learn about God and his love for them in their own language. And as you mentioned earlier, LHF has been around for a while, and recently the founder of LHF was recognized here at Concordia Seminary. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, Pastor Ron received the Distinguished Alumnus Award just this past Friday, and well deserved after 50 years. And at the luncheon, he was introduced by my old mentor, Dr. Robert Kolb, who can attest to the fact that he has been able to use a lot of the LHF materials in countries where he has traveled, in India and Russia, and to be able to point people to documents in their own language so they could follow along with him. And of course, we published Dr. Kolb as well, Christian Faith, many of the books that he has also written, teaching all people, baptizing. We love to print him and get him into the languages of many other people. And Pastor Ron is 85 years young, so he still wanders around the country and visits churches. So he's always happy to come and visit, as are many of our staff members as well.
Outstanding. And thanks be to God for him and the work that he's been doing these many years as well. Dr. Heise, where can we learn more about Lutheran Heritage Foundation and the great work happening through LHF?
Well, you can just go to lhfmissions.org, and that is a plural, missions, lhfmissions.org. And for those who might be interested in just reading this booklet that the Finnish Church produced, you could go to www.lhfmissions.org/male and female. And if you go to our website, you'll actually be able to read a PDF version of that booklet, because as we've talked about that persecution, people have asked, where can I read this? Not in Finnish, because most of us don't know Finnish.
Very good. Dr. Heise, thank you so much for joining us on the Coffee Hour today, giving us a great update on Lutheran Heritage Foundation.
Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Pastor James Cleland.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit kfuo.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.